A suspected gunman in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting has been charged with 29 counts, including hate crimes. This follows a week of package bomb scares that were sent to Democratic political leaders and critics of President Trump around the country.
And an attack at a Kroger grocery store in Kentucky is also being investigated as a hate crime after a white man allegedly shot and killed 2 black people. And the question people are asking at home, how do we find hope amid so much hate? With us now is Reverend Chloe Breyer. She's the executive director of the Interfaith Center of New York. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, that is the question, sort of how do you find hope? And I know for me, as I watch TV, not just the bombings and the incident at Kroger and in Philadelphia, I kept on wondering, how can this be the country that I live in? Because when I walk out my front door and talk to people, none of this is happening. It's sort of like a disconnect. I can't believe that this is the country, this is what this country has become.
It is, it's what happened on Saturday morning was an echo of some of the darkest parts of humanity, and we are seeing instances like this too often. I work in a place where we build religious diversity and try to make our city safe for that, because religious freedom was one of the things that we founded this, this country on. And there has always been a struggle, if you look back in our history, about how we bring on and how we interact with who we perceive as the other.
True.
And whether it was the attacks, the attacks on Quakers, whether it was the attacks on Catholics in the 19th century, both in terms of the vitriolic language used against them and the physical violence, whether it was the internment of Japanese or the deeply anti-Semitic acts that happened, when we turned Jewish refugees away in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. So we're a country who has struggled deeply with this issue of how do we, out of many, become one. Mm-hmm. And I do that on a day-to-day basis here in New York City, where we speak 163 languages or more in the public schools. We have more than 50% of our, in parts of the city where people are born abroad. And we have to live together. We have to do this. Mm-hmm. And part of our struggle now is holding our leaders accountable for not just what they say after a mass shooting, but what they say before it. Mm. Mm-hmm. And how the hate speech that we hear too often and the divisive speech that we hear coming from our leaders right now is part of the problem.
So it's interesting to me that just a few days ago, the body of Matthew Shepard, the young man who became a symbol of the struggles that LGBTQ people face in this country and around the world, was finally laid to rest at the National Cathedral. And I was surprised to hear that. And the reason was because it had taken all this time to find a safe place to lay him to rest. And I think about Dylan Roof and the people he massacred at that church in South Carolina. And now this. And it makes me wonder if what somebody posited a few weeks ago is perhaps, as much as we like to idealize who we are as a nation and our values, that perhaps this struggle is a bigger one than we thought, that there are probably more misogynist and more racist people in America than had been previously thought. Do you subscribe to that?
I think that we have a story that we tell ourselves, which is a really important story, that we are a country made up of people from all over the world with a certain set of values that is a good and strong set of values. But we're also made up of human beings that are plagued by every kind of fear and hatred and sense of victimization. And it's up to us to hold our leaders accountable for bringing out the best in us. Our founders said, democracy is, it's great, it's the best kind of institution, but it's also what we need to hold our demons at bay. And so that's why we have checks and balances. That's why we have protect certain freedoms. But, we got to be able to figure it out. We have to be able to honor the Second Amendment without letting people who have track records in hatreds and mental illness get AR-15s more easily than they do teddy bears. I mean, it's guys, we can do this. We're capable of it. And there are massive things that we have challenges right now, but we're also capable of coming together, not just after tragedies happen.
You know, when I saw the woman in the piece, the last woman who said, you know, we got to talk to our neighbors, we got to connect with each other, I think that's true. But she's already talking to her neighbors. She's already connecting. This alleged shooter, Bowers, he's hiding, you know, in his bedroom on a computer, swirling around with like-minded people. I mean, can this idea of connecting with each other, can that really have an impact on a guy like that, this alleged shooter who's deliberately isolating himself?
There are many resources to fight hate that we have at our disposal. We have the ability to connect with our neighbors. We also have the ballot box. Right. We are lucky on that count, and we are capable of making decisions not only out of fear, but out of hope. And I think the time has come when we sit down and we say to ourselves, there are people around the world that don't have the opportunity to vote, and we do, so let's get out there and do a better job of picking our leaders, to be honest.
Because you're right, the tone is set at the top, and there are people now who are looking at some of the language, and some of those words include evil, destroy. When you use those words over and over again, that can have an effect on people like this alleged shooter, Bowers. Reverend Chloe Breyer, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.